As Brenda and I walked back to the surgery, she finally said, "He's very sweet. If I didn't know better, I'd say you two are smitten with each other." What? Don't be silly. I could be wrong, she teased. But honestly, if Ben and I hadn't been there, you two would have just sat staring at each other. I stopped, hand to my forehead. My stomach churned, my eyes stung. Brenda, what's wrong with me? She hugged me gently. Nothing's wrong. I think you're falling in love. And you've never been in love before, have you? Dumbly, I shook my head. Well then, she smiled, you're in for quite the adventure. Back at the surgery, I treated Susan Monroe's little boy for a scraped leg from a bicycle accident. Is it serious, Jackie? Susan asked anxiously. She was 8 months pregnant and clearly uncomfortable. It looks worse than it is, I assured her as I cleaned the wound. How did you do this, Tommy? I wasn't looking where I was going, he mumbled. Probably daydreaming, I teased with a smile. He blushed, and Susan laughed with relief. All good now, I said, finishing up. Later, over coffee, I noticed Eleanor and Brenda exchanging knowing glances. Eleanor was just telling me about Scott, Brenda said with a grin. Don't look at me like that, Jackie, Eleanor said quickly. She mentioned she met Ben and Scott, so I just filled in a few details. I shook my head, but couldn't help smiling. The next morning, Brenda packed to leave. After Eleanor said goodbye, I hugged her tightly. I wasn't pretending about our friendship, you know that, right? Of course. And you're not a patient to me, Jackie, you're my friend. Promise you'll come back? I'll come back for the wedding, she teased. I laughed and waved as she drove off. Scott did call. He asked if I'd like to go for a drive in the country on Saturday. I'd love to. I'll make a picnic. Great. Lou and I swim in a little stream we know, so bring your swimsuit. The only one I owned was a simple dark blue one-piece I'd used for laps at the complex pool. I wasn't sure how I felt about wearing it in front of Scott. I borrowed a basket from Eleanor and filled it with cold chicken, salads, bread, fruit, and even a pie. She added bottles of her homemade lemonade. Saturday morning, I chose a sleeveless white shirt and denim skirt over my swimsuit, comfortable sandals, and a straw hat. I redirected my calls to the county hospital and drove to Scott's. Hi, Jackie, Ben greeted me. Morning, Ben. How are you? Fit as ever, he chuckled. I'm heading out to see customers. You three have fun. You're not coming with us? He shook his head with a grin. If I'm not around, maybe Scott will actually talk. I laughed. You think? I hope so, he said seriously. Lou came running out. Hi, Jackie. Dad's coming. Scott appeared, smiling. He wore a simple shirt and jeans, looking every bit the easygoing countryman. Hi, I said. Hi there, he murmured, his gaze lingering a moment before he smiled warmly. Lou, help me with the picnic, I said quickly, trying to steady myself. We loaded the basket into the truck and set off, Lou between us. She turned on the radio, and before long she and I were singing along to an old Dolly Parton song. Scott watched with a quiet smile. What? I asked after the song ended. Nothing, he said, shaking his head. Just enjoying this. The stream was crystal clear and icy cold, nestled among smooth river rocks. I'm going in, Lou shouted, running into the water. Come on, Jackie. I glanced at Scott, then shrugged, stepping out of my skirt and shirt. I joined Lou in the water, the shock of the cold making us both laugh. Scott watched from the bank, grinning at the sight of Lou splashing around. For the first time in a long time, I felt carefree, laughing in the sunshine, the sound of the water and birds filling the air. Scott joined us in swim shorts as Lou and I splashed each other, giggling like children. He laughed as he waded in, water droplets flying everywhere. We swam and played games for over an hour, chasing each other through the clear water. When we finally came out, tired but happy, I held Lou's hand in one and Scott's in the other. Let's eat, I announced. Lou clapped with delight, and soon we had the blanket spread, the food arranged, and laughter filling the air. This is great, Scott murmured between bites of chicken, and I smiled. Apple pie, I offered Lou. She nodded eagerly. Later, Lou curled up on the blanket, her head resting in my lap, her feet across her father's legs. Scott and I leaned back, comfortable, a gentle breeze moving through the trees. Is she asleep? Scott asked softly. I think so, I said, brushing Lou's hair back gently. She wears herself out, he smiled. She's wonderful, Scott. You know that. She likes you a lot. He hesitated, then added quietly, I like you a lot too. He took my hand, holding it firmly but gently. That's good, I whispered, looking into his blue eyes. Because I like you too. He leaned closer and kissed me, tender and warm. It was like our first goodnight kiss, sweet, steady, and enough to make me sigh with happiness. Resting my head against his shoulder, I thought, life couldn't be better than this. The 3 months were nearly over. I hadn't spoken to Ron about the council's search for a doctor, and I found myself wondering, did I really want to leave? Did I even want to go back to research? The truth was clear, I no longer wished for my old life. I found Ron and Sheriff Hopkins at the diner. Have you found a doctor, Ron? I asked, sliding into their booth. Ron looked nervous. We've been searching, Jackie, truly. We even interviewed one last month, John added. But he didn't measure up. Measure up to what? I asked, puzzled. To you, John admitted sheepishly. I blushed. Could you stay another month? Ron asked hopefully. I shook my head slowly. Not a month. Their faces fell. More like 12 months, I said at last. Their jaws dropped, and I laughed. You win, Ron. I love this town. Just the town. John teased, but I ignored him with a smile. Let's make it official. A proper contract. Ron grinned like a child at Christmas. When I told Eleanor, she danced me around the reception area, hugging me. A secret until the council approves, I warned. A secret? Eleanor laughed. Not in this town. The next evening, Eleanor sent me rushing to the school gym on the pretense of an emergency. I flung open the doors, only for the lights to blaze on and a crowd to shout surprise. A banner stretched across the stage, Welcome, Dr. Jackie. Ron stepped forward. Sorry to trick you, Jackie, but we wanted to celebrate your decision to stay and officially welcome you. I looked around, eyes filling with tears as Eleanor hugged me, followed by Rhoda, Alice, and dozens of others. Even the children were cheering. Scott and Lou came forward. Congratulations, Scott said with his slow smile. I'm afraid you'll have to put up with me another year, I said brightly. I'm glad, Lou beamed. So am I, Scott said softly. Then, in front of everyone, he pulled me into a warm embrace and kissed me. There were murmurs and laughter in the crowd, and Lou shouted joyfully, Yahoo! I didn't care, I was too busy smiling through happy tears. Part 11, 10 years on. Scott, I don't really want to go to the country club, I groaned, adjusting my dress. At 7 months pregnant, I was exhausted. Scott kissed my cheek gently. We'll just make an appearance and leave, okay? Lou's already there. Dad's taking the boys. We'll be home before you know it. Promise? Promise. We drove from our rambling house in town, the home I adored. Scott's boat business had grown, employing dozens of people, and Ben now lived with us, happily retired and always there for the children. As we pulled into the crowded lot, I frowned. A lot of cars. What's this event again? Council business, Scott said with a mischievous smile. The country club looked empty as he guided me inside. Then suddenly, surprise. A banner unfurled, Congratulations, Dr. Jackie, 10 years in Indian mask. I laughed and shook my head, wagging my finger at Scott. You terrible man. You could have told me. He only grinned, slipping his arm around me. And surrounded by friends, family, and community, I realized I wouldn't have wanted it any other way. I'm the mayor, honey, I had to keep it a secret. Scott led me to a long table and I was surprised to see Brenda and her husband Bob seated at it, along with Ben, Lou, and my 2 sons, Sam and Matt with Eleanor and Carl. Congratulations, Brenda said, kissing my cheek as she embraced me. Who'd have thought, huh? Yeah, I said Riley, who would have? Scott helped me into my chair and then he walked over to the microphone. Ben leaned over with a wink. Remember the good old days, Jackie, when Scott wouldn't say anything. Now we can't shut him up. Sam and Matt giggled at that, and I had to smile. Lou leaned over and held my hand. You okay, Mom? I nodded and rummaged in my bag for tissues. I had a feeling I was going to need them. Ladies and gentlemen, Scott began, I'm not going to talk for long. That'd be a change. John Hopkins called out and everyone laughed. That'll be enough out of you, John Hopkins, or I'm going to have to get the new sheriff to lock you up. Everyone laughed and John grinned. He had been retired for 3 years and the replacement, as everyone knew, was his son-in-law. Seriously, folks, we're here to celebrate Jackie's 10 years of unswerving dedication to our community. I flinched at unswerving, but everyone applauded. And we're going to get everyone to reminisce, so I'll hand over to our MC for tonight, Louise Carson. Lou winked and took a radio microphone from one of the staff and stood in the center of the room. I remember when I first met Mom. I was lying in a smashed car with a broken arm and bleeding all over the place. I was 8 and very scared when suddenly this calm face appeared and began to put things right. For a minute, I thought I had died and she was an angel. I groaned at that and buried my head in my hands while people laughed. Let's get some more memories. Eleanor, Lou said, holding the portable microphone to Eleanor, do you remember when you first met Dr. Carson? I sure do. This feisty young woman came in with you and your dad after the accident and told me she was a doctor. You didn't believe her, did you? No, she didn't look old enough, but she soon proved she was a doctor and a good one. She's also a dear friend to me, and I think she's wonderful.